Tonight we're not in Hollywood. We're in Napa Valley, where the drama is as rich and full-bodied as the local Cabernet. We're at the lavish engagement party of tech billionaire Jude Halstead. He's about to raise a toast to his stunning new fiancée, Ivy, in front of the world's elite. He thinks he's on top of the world, standing in the Vineyard, where he plans to build his future. But what he doesn't know is that the ground he's standing on has already shifted beneath him. In a move of breathtaking audacity, his ex-wife, the woman he thought he'd left in his past, has just signed the deed to the entire estate. He's about to thank his new love, not as a host, but as a tenant. And she's here to watch. The evening of June 12th was draped in the kind of flawless California twilight that felt personally commissioned by God, or at the very least by someone with an obscene amount of money. At Serenity Hills Vineyard, a sprawling jewel in Napa Valley's crown fairy lights, dripped from ancient oak trees like captured stars. The air thick with the scent of lavender, night-blooming jasmine, and damp, fertile earth carried the murmur of expensive chatter and the clinking of Baccarat champagne flutes. This was not merely a party, it was a declaration. Jude Halstead, at 46, stood at the center of it all, a king surveying his newly conquered territory. His suit was Tom Ford, tailored so precisely it seemed to have been stitched onto his athletic frame. His smile was a weapon of mass charisma, honed over years of boardroom negotiations and venture capital pitches that had turned his software company, Nexus Dynamics, into a global titan. He was the quintessential new money billionaire, audacious, restless, and utterly convinced of his own manifest destiny. Clinging to his arm, looking up at him with adoring, doe-like eyes, was Ivy Fairchild. At 25, she was perfection sculpted from porcelain and starlight, her dress a shimmering silver creation by a designer whose name was whispered in reverent tones, clung to her figure like a second skin. On her left hand, a diamond the size of a quail's egg greedily drank the light, a gaudy testament to Jude's wealth and her victory. She was an influencer, a socialite, a beautiful canvas onto which Jude could paint the next, more glamorous chapter of his life. To the assembled guests, a glittering menagerie of tech moguls, San Francisco socialites and East Coast financiers, they were the perfect couple. A powerful self-made man trading up for a younger, more dazzling model. It was a story as old as time, and in their world, it was a story of success. Jude surveyed the crowd, his chest swelling with a pride so potent it was almost intoxicating. He saw his COO, David Chen, laughing with a senator. He saw venture capitalists who had once scoffed at his ideas, now sipping his vintage champagne. And in a quiet corner, he saw Ivy's mother. Marcella Fairchild, her eyes sharp and calculating, watching her daughter's performance with the intensity of a hawk. Marcella was a woman from a family that had lost its old money fortune generations ago, and she had spent her life clawing to get back within sniffing distance of it. In Jude, she saw not a son-in-law, but a winning lottery ticket. "Isn't it perfect, my love?" Ivy murmured, her voice a breathy whisper, designed for his ears alone. "Everything is just perfect." "It's a perfect start," Jude corrected her, squeezing her hand. "This place, it's going to be our home. We'll build a house on that ridge overlooking the vines, a place for our children." The words hung in the air, a future he was actively willing into existence. But for a fleeting, unwelcome moment, the ghost of another future, another woman, flickered in his mind. Esme. His ex-wife. Esme Hollings. The name felt like a foreign word in his mouth, now something from a dusty, forgotten textbook. Their divorce had been finalized 14 months ago, a process he'd considered a resounding success. Esme, the quiet, intellectual woman from a staid, old-money Philadelphia family, had been his partner for 15 years. Her family's seed money, a modest $250,000, he now considered pocket change, had been the catalyst for his first company. Her connections had opened doors. Her steady, unassuming presence had been the bedrock upon which he built his empire. But bedrock is not exciting. It's not thrilling. Over time, her quiet strength felt like judgment. Her preference for substantive conversation over glittering parties felt like a limitation. He had started to see her as a relic of his past, a black-and-white photograph in his new Technicolor life. The divorce had been brutal, but conducted with a chilling civility in the public eye. His lawyers, a pack of corporate sharks, had descended upon her. They'd painted her as an out-of-touch woman who hadn't contributed to the company's real growth in years. They had leveraged a draconian non-disclosure agreement he'd made her sign a decade prior, effectively gagging her from speaking about their life or the business. In the end, Esme had surprised everyone. She didn't fight for the half of the fortune she was likely entitled to. She and her lawyer, a shrewd, silver-haired family friend named Arthur Sterling, from the prestigious firm Hollings and Sterling, had negotiated a settlement that on paper looked like a fraction of what she could have claimed. Jude had seen it as a surrender, a quiet admission that she couldn't handle the fight. He'd taken her acceptance of the deal as proof of her weakness, of her obsolescence. He'd signed the papers, transferred the funds, and promptly scrubbed her from his narrative, replacing her with the bright, shiny promise of Ivy. He had met Ivy at a charity gala in Monaco 6 months after the separation. She was a breath of fresh air, all vibrant energy and flattering admiration. She didn't challenge his opinions. She amplified them. She didn't want to discuss geopolitical trends. She wanted to post selfies on a yacht. She was easy. She was beautiful. She was the perfect accessory for the man he wanted to be. Now standing in Serenity Hills Vineyard, Jude felt the final, satisfying click of his new life locking into place. This vineyard had been a particular sticking point in the divorce. It had been their place. His and Esme's. He had proposed to her on the very knoll where a string quartet was now playing Vivaldi. They had spent weekends here dreaming of a quiet future of growing old together amongst the gnarled vines. During the asset division, his lawyers had argued it was a corporate asset, and he had managed to keep it under his control. It felt like the ultimate victory, rewriting his history with Esme, by making this sacred ground the launch pad for his future with Ivy. He had even instructed his team to rush the purchase from the corporate holding entity into his personal name, a deal he believed was finalizing this very week, just in time for the party. The vineyard manager, a weathered man named Liam, who had worked the land for 30 years, approached him discreetly. Liam's face was a road map of worry lines, and he held a tablet in his hand. "Mr. Halstead, apologies for the interruption. A magnificent party." "Thank you, Liam." "It is, isn't it?" Jude beamed. "Everything to your satisfaction." Liam hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "Sir, mostly. It's just, I've been trying to get a final sign-off on the pyrotechnics permit for the midnight fireworks display. The county regulations are very strict. The clearance needs to be authorized by the legal property owner." Jude waved a dismissive hand. "You're looking at him. I own this place. Just put my name on it." "Well, that's the thing, sir," Liam said, his voice dropping lower. "I submitted it with your name this afternoon, as instructed, but it was rejected about an hour ago. The county clerk sent it back. They said the ownership transfer on record was finalized yesterday afternoon, and the signatory needs to be the new legal owner. The name on the deed isn't Jude Halstead. Jude's smile faltered. A cold knot of confusion tightened in his stomach. What? That's impossible. My legal team assured me it was done. There must be a clerical error. Who do they have listed? Liam swallowed hard, his gaze shifting uncomfortably towards the grand Vineyard house on the hill, its windows glowing warmly in the twilight. He looked back at Jude, his expression a mixture of pity and professional duty. The deed was filed yesterday at 4:52 p.m. with the Napa County Recorder's Office. The vineyard, the winery, the residence, all 300 acres. It was a cash purchase, no mortgage. Liam took a deep breath. According to the official record, sir, the sole proprietor of Serenity Hills Vineyard is a holding company. Hollings Sterling Enterprises. He paused, letting the name sink in. The signatory and sole director of that company is listed as Esme Hollings. The world, which had been spinning in a perfect glittering orbit around Jude Halstead, came to a sudden screeching halt. The music seemed to fade. The laughter of his guests turned into a dull, mocking roar. He looked from Liam's grim face to the triumphant diamond on Ivy's hand, and then his eyes, wide with disbelief and dawning horror, were drawn inexorably toward the main house on the hill. The French doors to the veranda were open. A silhouette stood there motionless, looking down upon the party. It was the figure of a woman, poised and elegant. He couldn't see her face, but he didn't need to. He knew the posture. He knew the quiet, unshakable stillness. It was Esme. And just as this catastrophic realization hit him, the band leader, a man he'd paid an exorbitant amount of money to fly in from New York, stepped up to his microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for our gracious hosts. And now it is my great pleasure to invite the man of the hour, Mr. Jude Halstead, to the stage to say a few words." A spotlight found Jude, pinning him in its white glare. A wave of applause washed over him. Ivy squeezed his arm, whispering, "Darling, that's you. Go on." He was trapped in the blinding light on land he didn't own, at a party that was now a monumental testament to his own humiliation. He felt 100 pairs of eyes on him, and from the house on the hill, he felt one pair. He had the microphone, he had the stage, he had an audience, and he had absolutely no idea that the real story of the night was just beginning. His carefully constructed world was not just shaking, it was about to be systematically dismantled vine by vine. Time seemed to warp and stretch. The short walk from his table to the small, elegantly decorated stage felt like a trek across a frozen desert. Every smiling face he passed seemed to be hiding a smirk. Every congratulatory nod felt like a jab of mockery. Did they know? Could they possibly know? His mind raced a frantic scramble for a logical explanation. A mistake. A legal maneuver by Esme to spite him, something his lawyers would crush in the morning. It had to be. He reached the microphone, the metal cool and solid beneath his trembling hand. He looked out at the sea of faces, shimmering in the twilight. He saw David Chen, his brow furrowed with concern. He saw Marcella Fairchild, her painted smile tight with confusion. And he saw Ivy, her expression a perfect portrait of beaming pride, utterly oblivious. Her ignorance was almost as infuriating as Esme's audacity. He had a choice. He could create a scene, call a halt to the proceedings, demand answers. That would be an admission of defeat, a public unraveling. Or he could do what he had always done. Project unassailable confidence. He would play the part, deliver the speech, and deal with the firestorm in private. Control the narrative. That was his mantra. He cleared his throat. The sound was amplified across the manicured lawns, momentarily silencing the chatter. "Thank you," he began, his voice smoother than he felt. "Thank you all for being here tonight. To see all of you, our dearest friends, family and partners gathered in this truly magical place means the world to us." He paused, forcing a warm smile. He could feel the eyes from the house on the hill burning into his back. He refused to look. "I've always believed that life is about evolution, about moving forward, about shedding the past to embrace a brighter, more vibrant future." The words were a clear, intentional dig at Esme, a line he had rehearsed with a smug sense of satisfaction. Now they tasted like ash in his mouth. "And my future," he said, turning to beam at Ivy, who placed a hand over her heart, "is standing right there." The crowd awed on cue. Ivy's eyes glistened with perfectly timed tears. "Ivy," Jude continued, his voice swelling with practiced emotion, "you came into my life like a sunrise after a long, grey winter. You brought color. You brought passion. You brought life. You've shown me what it means to truly live, not just exist." Every word was a performance, a desperate, frantic lie designed to paper over the gaping sinkhole that had just opened beneath his feet. He was praising the sunrise while standing in a building that belonged to the winter. "And so we wanted to celebrate our beginning here." He gestured around the vineyard, the movement feeling stiff and unnatural. "In this place, Serenity Hills, because it represents a new foundation, a place where we will build our home, our family, and our future. It's the end of one chapter and the glorious beginning of another." He raised his glass. "So please join me in a toast to Ivy. My love, my future, my everything. And to new beginnings. To Ivy. To new beginnings." The crowd echoed, glasses held high. As they drank, a wave of relief washed over Jude. He'd done it. He had navigated the minefield. Now he could get off this stage and unleash hell on his legal team and then on Esme. But as he turned to step down, he saw Liam, the Vineyard manager, in a hushed but urgent conversation with David Chen. David's face was pale. David caught his eye and gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head, a clear warning. It was too late. The damage was not contained. The first ripple of chaos began not with a shout, but with a whisper. A well-known gossip columnist, a woman named Beatrice Finch, who had a nose for scandal, was seen speaking animatedly into her phone. A moment later, phones began to light up across the lawn like fireflies. The low murmur of the party began to change in tone, shifting from polite chatter to excited, urgent buzzing. Ivy, finally sensing the shift in atmosphere, glided to Jude's side. "Darling, what's happening?" "People are staring." Before he could answer, Marcella Fairchild appeared, her face a mask of barely controlled panic. "Jude, my phone is blowing up. A news alert just came through from the Financial Times. Something about a major real estate transaction in Napa. It mentions your ex-wife. And then the ghost at the feast chose to make her entrance." Esme Hollings did not storm in. She did not shout. She descended the stone steps from the main house with the unhurried grace of a queen taking a stroll through her own garden. She wore a simple, impeccably tailored navy blue dress that spoke of quiet confidence, not ostentatious wealth. Her dark hair was pulled back in an elegant chignon, and her only jewelry was a pair of pearl earrings and a watch with a worn leather strap. She wasn't dressed for a party. She was dressed for business. She was followed by her lawyer, Arthur Sterling, who carried a slim leather portfolio. They didn't head for Jude. Instead, they walked directly to the bar, where Esme requested a glass of water from a stunned bartender. She took a sip, her eyes calmly sweeping over the scene. She wasn't a crasher. She was an owner, making her presence known. The effect was immediate and devastating. The party fractured. Conversations died mid-sentence. All eyes swiveled from Jude and Ivy to the woman standing serenely by the bar. The narrative Jude had fought so desperately to control had been hijacked in a single, silent act of defiance. Jude felt a surge of white-hot rage that eclipsed his fear. This was a public execution. Leaving Ivy and her mother standing frozen, he strode across the lawn toward Esme, his footsteps crunching on the gravel path. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he hissed, his voice low and venomous. Esme turned to face him. Up close, he saw that she was not the timid, worn-down woman he remembered from the divorce proceedings. There were new lines of confidence around her eyes. The haunted look was gone, replaced by a steely resolve. "Jude," she said, her voice even and calm. "I'm admiring the party. You've spared no expense, though I'm afraid the fireworks might be an issue." The permit wasn't approved. The casual, factual nature of her statement was more infuriating than any insult. "I will ruin you for this, Esme. This pathetic, vengeful stunt, my lawyers will tear you apart." "Your lawyers," Arthur Sterling interjected, stepping forward slightly. His tone was mild, but his eyes were like chips of ice. "Jude, I'd be more concerned with what your lawyers have failed to do. For instance, they failed to perform a final title check before advising you to host a major event on a property you do not own. That seems like a rather significant oversight. This is a game. You've manipulated something." Jude spat. "Not at all," Esme said, taking another sip of water. "It was a straightforward transaction. The previous owners were eager to sell. I simply made them an offer they couldn't refuse. All cash, a quick close. It's what you taught me, isn't it? Be decisive. Go after what you want." Her words struck him like a physical blow. She was using his own philosophy against him. From across the lawn, he could see Ivy watching them, her beautiful face a canvas of confusion and dawning fear. Her mother was whispering furiously in her ear. This was not part of their plan. The perfect dream was cracking at the seams. Jude lowered his voice further, trying to contain the explosion he felt building inside him. "Why, Esme? Why this, after all this time? Was the settlement not enough? You want to embarrass me?" Esme finally allowed a flicker of genuine emotion to cross her face. It wasn't anger. It was something closer to pity. "Embarrass you," she said softly. "Oh, Jude, you still think this is about you?" She gestured with her free hand to the vines, the rolling hills, the old stone winery. This was supposed to be our dream. Not mine, not yours. Ours. The one you traded for. That. She gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod towards Ivy. "You didn't just discard me, Jude. You discarded this, our history. You tried to erase it, to pave over it with something new and shiny. You thought you could take a place that was sacred to us and turn it into a stage for your new life. She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper that was for him alone. I didn't buy this place to ruin your party. I bought it because it's mine. I bought it to reclaim a piece of my life that you tried to steal. Your party is just a fortunate coincidence. Consider it the housewarming." With that, she turned her back on him and said to Arthur loud enough for those nearby to hear, "Arthur, perhaps we should check on the catering staff. I want to make sure they're aware of the change in management for their final invoicing. It was a masterstroke of power, delivered not with a shout, but with the quiet, devastating authority of an owner taking charge of her property." Jude was left standing alone, the host of a party who had just been reduced to an uninvited guest. The King of Serenity Hills was now nothing more than a trespasser, and his carefully built empire was about to face a reckoning it was utterly unprepared for. The unraveling was not a single event, but a rapid and brutal succession of waves, each one tearing away another layer of Jude Halstead's meticulously constructed reality. It began with the social fabric of the evening, then tore through the personal, and finally crashed into the bedrock of his legal and financial existence, leaving nothing but ruin in its wake. Wave 1. The social implosion. The moment Esme turned her back on Jude, a palpable shift occurred in the atmosphere. It was as if a soundproof barrier had shattered. The polite ambient murmur of the party ceased, replaced by a charged silence that was quickly filled by a new, more urgent sound, the electric buzz of scandal. Across the manicured lawn, champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. Heads that had been politely inclined in conversation now swiveled as one, their focus lasering in on the drama unfolding near the main house. The air, once thick with jasmine and expensive perfume, now crackled with speculation. Ivy felt the change first as a cold dread that seeped through her shimmering silver dress. The adoring gazes that had followed her all evening had curdled into something else, something hungry and predatory. She was no longer the fairy tale princess. She was now one half of a developing catastrophe, and she could feel the narrative slipping from her grasp. Her mother Marcella felt it too, but her reaction was not fear. It was fury. This was a direct assault on her life's masterpiece. She grabbed her daughter's arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into Ivy's skin like talons. "Do not just stand there gawking," Marcella hissed, her voice a low, venomous command. Her smile remained plastered on her face, a grotesque mask of festivity. Shoulders back, chin up. You are a Halstead now. You will stand by your man. Project unity, Ivy. Project strength. We do not lose control. Ivy, jolted by the pain, and the command tried to comply. She attempted to rearrange her features into a look of concerned, supportive love, but her face felt like a stranger's, the muscles refusing to obey. Her influencer's instinct to manage the image was at war with the raw, primal terror of a young woman watching her entire future catch fire. She took a hesitant step toward Jude, a marionette with tangled strings, but Jude was oblivious to her. His universe had contracted to a single point of focus, Esme. The public humiliation was a lit fuse, rocketing toward the powder keg of his ego. He saw the whispers, felt the stares of his peers, the VCs, the rivals, the sycophants, and interpreted them as judgments on his power. This was not just an interruption. It was a coup. He moved toward Esme, his stride long and furious. Each step across the lawn was a walk through a gauntlet of his own, making every face a mirror, reflecting his own sudden impotence. He caught up to her, just as she reached the first of the stone steps, leading to the veranda, grabbing her arm to halt her ascent. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" He snarled, the words tearing from his throat, raw and unrestrained. Esme stopped. She didn't flinch or pull away. Instead, she slowly looked down at his white-knuckled hand on her arm, then raised her eyes to meet his. Her gaze was not fiery. It was profoundly disappointingly calm. "Let go of me, Jude." Her composure was gasoline on his fire. "You did this to destroy me." He accused, his voice rising, drawing the attention of the nearest clusters of guests, who now shamelessly edged closer. "No, Jude," she replied, her voice steady and clear, carrying easily in the sudden quiet. "You are doing a fine job of that all by yourself. You with your pathological need for an audience. You with your hubris. Did you really believe that the 15 years we spent building a life together meant so little that I would simply vanish? That I would let you desecrate our most sacred memories without a single word?" "Memories?" he scoffed, a cruel, dismissive laugh escaping his lips. "I built an empire." "You were there." "Yes, but I did the work. I took the risks. We had a business arrangement that had run its course. It's over. You lost. This is pathetic." He had finally said it. The lie he had told himself for years now weaponized and thrown at her feet. It was the moment the ice in Esme's veins didn't just crack. It sublimated into a vapor of pure, focused rage. Her back straightened, and though her voice remained level, it acquired a chilling, resonant power that seemed to vibrate in the air. A business arrangement. She repeated the words, precise and dripping with contempt. "I see. So my family's inheritance, the $250,000 that you begged my father for because no bank would give you a loan, that was just a transactional fee. My connections. The introductions to the investors my family had cultivated for 3 generations. That was just networking. The hundreds of nights I spent editing your business plans and coaching you through presentations while you threw tantrums of self-doubt, the dinners I hosted, the egos, I soothed the entire career in art curation that I placed on hold so you could pursue your dream. That was all just part of the administrative support for our business arrangement." She took a single step closer, invading his space, forcing him to hold her gaze. The crowd was utterly silent, hanging on every word. "I built the launch pad for you, Jude. I built it with my money, my family's name, and my life's energy. And when you finally got to the moon, you decided the woman who assembled the rocket with her bare hands was too much dead weight to keep on board. So don't you dare stand here on this land we chose together and call what we had a business arrangement." Wave 2. The second twist. As Jude stood reeling, his face pale with shock and fury, the second wave began to form. Marcella Fairchild, seeing her daughter frozen and her future son-in-law being verbally dismantled, decided on a direct intervention. In her world, problems were solved by asserting dominance. She would put this bitter, nostalgic ex-wife in her place. She strode forward, a galleon in full sail, her expression one of righteous maternal fury. She positioned herself between Jude and Esme, a new combatant entering the ring. "Mrs. Hollings," Marcella began, her voice slick with condescending pity. "I think you've made your point. I don't know what kind of bitter, pathetic game you're playing, but it's time to stop. Jude and my daughter are in love. They are building a future. The most graceful thing you could do is accept that and move on instead of orchestrating this theatrical, desperate nonsense." Esme's gaze shifted from Jude's stunned face to Marcella's. The fire in her eyes cooled, replaced by something far more dangerous, a look of placid, almost clinical recognition. She tilted her head slightly as if examining a curious specimen under a microscope. "Mrs. Fairchild Esme," said her tone suddenly soft conversational. "Marcella, isn't it? We've never had the pleasure of a formal introduction, but I feel as though I know you, or at least I know of your family's history." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Marcella's face. "I have no idea what you could possibly be talking about." "Oh, I think you do," Esme continued, her voice a silken thread of menace. "I spent 8 years chairing the acquisitions committee for the Sterling Hollings Foundation. We oversaw hundreds of applications. I have a rather good memory for details. I remember one in particular from about a decade ago. A request for a heritage commerce grant, a fund designed to help historically significant local businesses. The application was from a family whose third-generation textile business in the garment district had declared Chapter 11 bankruptcy. They were pleading for a bridge loan, citing distant historical ties to my grandmother's family." Esme paused, letting the silence hang for a beat. The Fairchild family. The blood drained from Marcella's face. Her expertly applied makeup suddenly looked like a fragile mask on a skull. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. This was a ghost from a past she had spent 20 years trying to outrun and bury. But Esme wasn't finished. She let her gaze drift past the horrified Marcella to Ivy, who was now standing ghost-white and trembling beside Jude. "And my memory is quite clear on another matter as well," Esme said, her voice still deceptively gentle. "A few years after that, we were reviewing the HR files from one of our portfolio companies, a boutique marketing firm called Argent Strategies. We had to handle a rather delicate termination. A summer intern, a very bright and ambitious young woman, had been caught using her manager's login credentials to access confidential client acquisition strategies. It was a serious ethical breach. She was summarily dismissed, of course, with a note in her file that made her essentially unemployable in that field. Esme's eyes locked onto Ivy's. Her name was Ivy Fairchild. A collective sharp intake of breath rippled through the nearest guests. Ivy let out a small, choked sound, as if she had been physically struck. This was her deepest shame, the secret that had derailed her ambitions and forced her into the superficial world of influencing a career built on image precisely because her real-world credentials had been torched. Jude spun to look at Ivy, his face a maelstrom of confusion, disgust, and dawning comprehension. The doe-eyed innocent, the breath of fresh air. It was all an act, a lie. He hadn't found her. He had been targeted. He wasn't her savior. He was her mark. The entire relationship, every whispered, "I love you," every adoring glance was recast in the sickening light of a calculated, desperate con. He had been played for the biggest fool in Silicon Valley. Esme delivered the final quiet incision, her attention still on Ivy. "You didn't just want his money, did you, Ivy? You wanted his name." The name Halstead was a disinfectant, powerful enough to bleach the stain of Fairchild, to make the world forget you weren't just a beautiful socialite, but a failed intern fired for corporate espionage. Wave 3. The legal Leviathan. Just as the emotional carnage reached its zenith, just as Jude felt the ground give way to an abyss of personal betrayal, the third and final wave struck. Arthur Sterling, who had been observing the proceedings with the patient stillness of a predator, chose this precise moment to step forward. The quiet authority in his movement commanded immediate attention. He opened the slim leather portfolio he carried, its click sounding unnaturally loud in the profound silence. "Jude Arthur," said his tone calm, professional, and utterly devoid of emotion. It was the voice of a man about to read an obituary. "While we are all gathered, there are a few outstanding legal matters we should probably address." "Get off my—" Jude started, then faltered, the words dying in his throat. He couldn't even finish the sentence. It wasn't his property. In a moment, Arthur said smoothly, as if granting a small indulgence. He pulled a document from the portfolio. "First, let's discuss the non-disclosure agreement, the one your legal team so aggressively drafted and insisted Esme sign upon your separation." He held up the paper. "It contains a rather comprehensive mutual non-disparagement clause. I'm sure you recall it. It explicitly prohibits either party from making public statements that could be reasonably construed as disparaging the other's character, personal life, or professional acumen." Arthur looked up from the page, his gaze pinning Jude in place. "Tonight, Jude on a stage with a microphone, in front of a significant assembly of your personal and professional peers, you delivered a speech in which you referred to your 15-year marriage to my client as a long grey winter, and spoke of the need to shed the past. My associates, we have 3 independent stenographers in the audience tonight, have a full verbatim transcript. Our legal opinion, Jude, is that your speech constitutes a flagrant and material breach of the very agreement you weaponized to ensure Esme's silence." A cold sweat broke out on Jude's forehead. That's absurd." "Is it?" Arthur countered, his voice like chipping ice. "The penalty clause for said breach, drafted, I might add, by your own lead counsel, is quite specific. It stipulates 2 things. First, the complete and immediate nullification of all confidentiality provisions within the NDA for both parties. And second, a liquidated damages penalty of $50 million. The number hung in the air, an impossible, suffocating weight. $50 million. But Arthur's hand was already reaching back into the portfolio. Second, he continued, pulling out a thicker file. Esme's purchase of this estate was, as you can imagine, a significant transaction. It triggered a full-scale, and I must say long overdue, forensic accounting review of all assets related to the divorce settlement. My team, while conducting their due diligence, uncovered certain irregularities. He slid a single sheet of paper from the file. It was a complex flowchart, a dizzying map of lines and boxes connecting shell corporations and offshore accounts. He held it up for Jude to see. "It appears Jude Arthur stated, his voice a flat line of accusation, that in the fiscal year preceding your divorce, you systematically devalued key marital assets, specifically your undeclared equity in several offshore tech incubators, your holdings in Ethelred Cayman Partners, and the Odyssey Growth Fund, to name just 2. You funneled capital through this labyrinth of shell companies, a process you clearly believed was untraceable, effectively hiding what we conservatively estimate to be $200 million in marital assets from both Esme and the court." David Chen, who had crept closer, let out a choked gasp. This wasn't a messy divorce anymore. This was wire fraud. This was conspiracy. This was criminal. You committed perjury in your financial disclosures. Jude Arthur concluded, his eyes as hard and unforgiving as granite. That is a felony. And now that Esme is no longer bound by the NDA, which you so conveniently breached for us tonight, she is free to bring this information to the attention of the appropriate authorities. He paused, letting the final blow gather its full devastating weight before delivering it, which on her instruction I did an hour ago. The Securities and Exchange Commission, the Internal Revenue Service, and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of California have all been sent a copy of this file. Checkmate. A profound, tomb-like silence descended upon the party. The chirping of crickets in the surrounding vineyards sounded like a screaming siren. Jude Halstead stood utterly exposed. His fiancée a fraud, his party a sham, his home the property of his ex-wife, his reputation incinerated, and his entire fortune and freedom now subject to the cold machinery of federal prosecution. Ivy, her face a mask of pure horror, finally broke. The dream had become a nightmare from which there was no waking up. With a strangled sob, she turned and fled into the darkness, a silver ghost disappearing into the trees. Marcella, her face aged a decade, in 10 minutes scurried after her 2 rats, deserting a ship that had already sunk to the bottom of the sea. Jude was left alone in the spotlight's glare, a king with no crown, no castle, no queen, and no future. The rage had evaporated, replaced by the cold, hollow, crushing emptiness of total and absolute defeat. He was surrounded by the wreckage of a life he had built on lies, brought down by the one truth he had tried and failed to erase. The end of the party was not an event. It was a detonation followed by a vacuum. The moment Esme and Arthur ascended the stone steps and disappeared into the main house, the fragile illusion of celebration shattered completely. The string quartet's music had long since died, leaving an unnatural quiet punctuated by the frantic whispers of guests and the crunch of gravel under the tires of hastily summoned cars. A collective panicked exodus was underway. It was the social equivalent of a shipwreck, with everyone scrambling for the lifeboats, eager to distance themselves from the wreckage of Jude Halstead's life. Jude remained frozen on the lawn, a statue at the center of his own disaster. The fairy lights, which hours ago had seemed so magical, now flickered with a cold, mocking indifference, illuminating a scene of opulent carnage, half-eaten plates of lobster, abandoned glasses of champagne growing warm and flat, a silk scarf snagged on a rose bush. His phone, a relentless brick of vibration against his leg, was a physical manifestation of the chaos he had unleashed. His COO, David Chen, calling with frantic urgency. His lawyers a chorus of confused rage. His PR team attempting to staunch a wound that was already fatal. He answered none of them. His gaze was fixed on the house on the hill, where a single warm light burned in an upstairs window. Esme's window. It was a beacon of calm, unassailable power, and it made the inferno of his life below feel all the more pathetic. The final indignity came not as a shout, but as a quiet professional request. A security guard, a man named Frank, whom Jude vaguely recognized, a man whose children's names Jude had never bothered to learn, approached him. His posture was apologetic, but his eyes were firm. Mr. Halstead Frank said, his voice studiously neutral, avoiding any hint of pity or malice. "I'm sorry, sir, but the new owner has requested we secure the property for the night. I can have one of my men drive you to the gate." The words hung in the cold night air. The new owner. Secure the property. He was being removed. Not just defeated, but evicted from the scene of his own coronation. He gave a single jerky nod, unable to form a reply. As he was led away, a trespasser on the land he thought he owned, he didn't look back. There was nothing left to see. In the days and weeks that followed, the private humiliation at the Vineyard, metastasized into a public immolation. Jude's world, once a glittering solar system, with him as the sun collapsed into a black hole of legal and financial ruin. His life became a sterile montage of depositions and emergency board meetings, held not in his own palatial corner office overlooking the San Francisco Bay, but in the stuffy, wood-paneled conference rooms of his lawyers. The smell of his old life of expensive cologne, rare orchids, and limitless power was replaced by the scent of old paper stale coffee and fear. He watched helpless as the stock ticker for Nexus Dynamics, NXDS, bled red on every financial network. He took a call from David Chen, not as a friend, but as a functionary of the board. David's voice was strained, stripped of all its old camaraderie. He informed Jude that he was being placed on an indefinite and immediate leave of absence, pending the results of the SEC investigation. Jude had been deposed not by an enemy, but by the very system he had mastered. He retreated to a soulless glass penthouse he still owned for now, a gilded cage, where he paced like a captive animal. It was there, amidst the sterile, white furniture and panoramic views of a city that no longer felt like his, that he received the final concise epitaph for his failed romance. A single text message from Ivy delivered with the cold finality of a guillotine. "You ruined everything." He stared at the words, a bitter laugh catching in his throat. The sheer, breathtaking arrogance of it. She, the con artist. Her mother, the puppeteer. And he, the willing, blinded fool. He had been so mesmerized by the reflection she showed him of a powerful, virile man entering his glorious second act that he never bothered to look at what was behind the mirror. She hadn't loved him. She had loved the idea of him, and he had loved the idea of her. And now their shared illusion lay in ruins. He didn't bother to reply. He simply tossed the phone onto a sofa, the screen a tiny glowing accusation in the cavernous empty room. Miles away in the sun-drenched hills of Napa, a different reality was taking root. Esme Hollings awoke the morning after the party to the sound of birdsong, not buzzing phones. She stepped onto the veranda, a simple mug of coffee in her hands, and breathed in the scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke. The quiet was profound. It was the sound of her life, finally her own. She didn't gloat. She didn't grant the dozens of interview requests that flooded Arthur Sterling's office. She worked. She found Liam in the winery, his face still etched with a lingering disbelief from the previous night. "Liam." She began her tone gentle but firm. "I want to be very clear. I know how to appreciate fine wine, but I know next to nothing about how it's made. I'm not the kind of owner who will issue directives from a distance. I want to learn. I need you to teach me starting from the soil up." Liam, a man who had worked this land for 30 years and had seen owners come and go, looked at her for a long moment. He saw no arrogance, no pretense. He saw genuine curiosity. He gave a slow nod. "All right, Miss Hollings. We'll start with the vines." Her days found a new rhythm, one dictated by the sun and the soil. She traded her tailored dresses for sturdy boots and her board meetings for long walks through the rows of grapes. She learned the subtle differences between the leaves of a Cabernet Sauvignon and a Merlot vine. The particular challenges of the clay-heavy soil on the western slope, the quiet language of the land. She reviewed the vineyard's operations with a keen eye. She fired the celebrity winemaker Jude had hired a man who spent more time on his personal branding than on the terroir. In his place, after reviewing dozens of resumes and dismissing the established names, she found Maria Flores. Maria was a young, fiercely intelligent UC Davis graduate whose thesis on biodynamic viticulture was considered both brilliant and rebellious. During their first meeting on the veranda, Maria spoke not of profit margins or market share, but of the microbiome of the soil and the soul of the grape. She saw winemaking not as manufacturing, but as a conversation with the land. In that moment, Esme knew she had found her partner. Together they made a bold decision. They began the painstaking, expensive process of uprooting acres of the high-yield, commercially safe grapes. Jude had favored preparing the land for new varietals that were riskier, but promised a wine of far greater character and complexity. It was an investment not in the next quarter, but in the next decade. And one crisp autumn afternoon, she sat at the large oak desk in the study and signed the final piece of paperwork. She was renaming the estate. Serenity Hills felt like a lie, a name chosen by Jude to represent a hollow piece he never possessed. She dipped the pen in ink and wrote in a clear, steady hand, Hollings Estate. It was not an act of ego, it was an act of reclamation, a tribute to the family, the name and the legacy that had been the silent, unacknowledged foundation of everything. 3 months after the party, Esme was sitting on that same veranda, the evening sun casting long shadows across the hills. A fire crackled in the outdoor hearth. She was tasting a sample from an old, forgotten barrel Maria had unearthed in the deepest corner of the cellar. Her phone buzzed beside her, and she saw it was Arthur. "Esme," he said, his voice as calm as ever. "I just got off the phone with Jude's counsel. They're ready to capitulate. He's offering a settlement." "What are the terms?" she asked, her eyes on the swirling garnet-colored wine in her glass. "He'll plead to lesser charges of financial misrepresentation with the SEC, which will keep him out of prison, but will effectively bar him from ever running a public company again. He'll pay a catastrophic fine, and he will liquidate a significant portion of his remaining Nexus stock to transfer the full $50 million penalty for the NDA breach to an account of your choosing. In return, you agree to waive any further civil claims." Arthur paused. "We could push for more, Esme. We could take almost everything that's left." Esme was quiet for a long moment. She thought of the years of quiet humiliation of being made to feel like an afterthought in her own life. The desire for absolute victory, for complete annihilation, was a tempting, dark whisper. But then she looked out at the rows of sleeping vines, at the land that was now hers, at the future she was building with her own 2 hands. Taking more of his money would keep them shackled together in a bitter dance of creditor and debtor. It would be a victory defined by him. She wanted a victory defined by her. "Take the deal, Arthur," she said, her voice clear and resolved. "Are you certain?" "Perfectly," she replied, a sense of profound peace settling over her like a warm blanket. "I don't want more of his money. I just want him out of my life, and out of my vineyard." After she hung up, she raised the glass to her lips. The wine was extraordinary. It was a vintage from long ago neglected and left in the dark, but it had used that time to develop a stunning complexity. There were deep notes of dark cherry and earth, but also a surprising resilient finish that was both strong and gentle. It was a wine with a story of survival. A genuine smile, the first truly untroubled smile in years, graced her face. It was not the triumphant smirk of a conqueror. It was the quiet, contented smile of a woman who had fought a war not by razing her enemy's kingdom, but by painstakingly cultivating her own garden. She had won not by destroying her past, but by finally beautifully reclaiming her future. So what's the real lesson in the story of Jude Esme and the vineyard? It's a powerful reminder that true strength isn't always the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes it's the quiet, calculated patience of someone who knows their own worth. Esme Hollings didn't need to scream to be heard. She simply changed the facts on the ground. She bought the very stage her ex-husband was standing on and let his own ego do the rest. It's a story about the danger of underestimating people and the profound power of reclaiming your own narrative piece by piece. What would you have done in Esme's position? Would you have sought revenge, or would you have chosen peace? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one, and if you love stories about intricate drama, poetic justice and powerful comebacks, make sure you hit that like button. Share this video with a friend who appreciates a good story, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more true life dramas you won't want to miss. Thanks for listening.